Working Class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about, lots of stuff on the Social Security front. Medicare, again, still under attack. Going to get to a bunch of that. Also, the corporate control of our media front and center. But going to start with tomorrow. I guess the news tomorrow, some body cam footage coming out of Memphis, Tennessee, I believe it is. 5 police officers were fired, have been, I guess, been arrested. I'm looking at this going, this has got to be bad. This, the story, not too long ago of this Tyree Nichols, a 29-year-old guy, pulled over at a traffic stop the beginning of the month. I'm waiting to see just how horrible this is when you have the police chief coming out and saying, hey, don't riot. It's going to be bad. No, there's never anything positive in this. But the 5 police officers were all African American, all black cops. And this isn't for me a white-black issue. It's never been. It's been a power issue. It's been a poverty issue. It's a lot of that. It's how we train our police departments. So I got a bunch of emails today of people going, this is why we need to defund the police. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I've never been a defund the police person. I think you need police. I think you need better police. I think you need people who de-escalate things. It's a tough job, and I admit it's a tough job. But you need people who are going to be a little more conscious. And it's not a military. I mean, we have turned our police departments, and this was strategic, into little militaries. We've given them surplus military armors. We got I think my police department, the little town, got a freaking tank. What do police departments need with a tank? I know they go and they bust drug dealers but this kind of war mentality, this filters down into just traffic stops. And I was having a conversation, with my wife, and I've had this conversation with the kids. If you need something, if you need to check on me, don't call the police. Because sadly, a lot of the mental health checks that hey, I'm worried about my neighbor. Can you send someone over? End badly. Because we haven't equipped our police departments with the ability to deal with all of these problems and all these crises. And understand, they're at the bottom of the heap. And I'm not justifying what these cops did. I'm waiting to see how horrible these videos are going to be. I mean, it's angering, it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking, but it's something we have to solve. Because as many people as I know go, this is why we need to abolish. No, it's never going to happen. Stop that. Stop saying dumb stuff that's never going to happen. How do we fix this problem? And for me, one of the things that I think is most important is that we recognize it is a tough job. And we recognize that they don't have the tools to deal with what they need, especially with all of the wide and diverse problems we have. And look, understand, our population now is much more heavily armed, much more likely to have guns and weapons than probably at any point in my lifetime. I was explaining to my son that, back in the old days, cops were, when they arrested somebody, they put your hands on the car and they put your hands behind your back, and they did horrible stuff. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't this gang mentality where every time you see an arrest, they're tackling someone to the ground and, someone's laying on their legs, someone's laying on their back. Complete disregard for the individual. And I get it. It's the safety of the officers. And look, I'll be honest. If I were a policeman, I actually don't know how I would react in a lot of situations. As I've always thought, there's my grandfather's statement of, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And that mentality, I got to think, permeates because we don't have laws that stop people from having weapons of war. And our media culture continues to push this narrative that it's an us or them. Even cops don't want bad cops in their ranks. So whenever these things, these appalling, heinous, these outrageous things come up, and trust me, it's going to be bad. When you see the police chief come out and lay out this groundwork and make the case of, please don't burn our city down. Please don't riot. Please don't cause what comes of these tragedies. Because they know it's going to be, it looks really bad. How do we fix the system? How do we go in and root out, well, what seems to be a huge problem? Now, I know it's easy to throw stones, but this is where policy matters. This is where policy matters, and having people coming in who are able to de-escalate situations. Now, look, I've been stopped at traffic stops as an old white guy, and even then the situations get somewhat sometimes elevated where they shouldn't. Okay, you pulled me over, write the ticket. You don't need a lecture, just write the ticket. We need to, and again, does this come back to training? Does this come back to, I don't know yet. I don't have the answer. But I know that these things keep popping up. And I know that it's not helpful. So policy-wise, where do we go? Have you had a problem? Have you been pulled over? Have you seen this? Because look, I know when here in Pennsylvania when they closed the state hospitals, and they basically let all these people out, these state mental hospitals, and all these people with mental health issues were just dropped into the streets. It was law enforcement who had to go and clean that up. It was law enforcement who had to deal with the homelessness problem because they're the enforcers. And I remember at the time, in a very bipartisan way, the then governor, Ed Rendell, and the mayor at the time, who was a Republican. So you had the governor who was a Democrat, the mayor was a Republican. Both of their offices contacted me when I started complaining about the fact that they closed the hospitals and it caused a homelessness problem because of the mental health, the mental health problems of these people on the streets. And, these people being harassed by police and arrested and all of this, bipartisan. Telling me it wasn't a problem. Again, laying this stuff at the feet of the police. So, in no way, shape, or form am I justifying what these cops did. I hope they get everything that they deserve, everything that they've earned in this. But tearing things down and burning things down, that's not necessarily going to be helpful. Because all it does is harden the opponents, the other side, the people who run around with we support the police flags, them. Those are the same ones who were stabbing policemen with those same flags on January 6th. There is a way to reach across that divide and say we want a better policing system. We want one that's fair. We want one that's not confrontational and dangerous when it doesn't have to be. A simple traffic stop that escalates into someone being shot and killed or beaten and mugged or whatever, I'm sorry, is just insane. But I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Just had to get that out of my system a little bit because, and look, this is where every time this comes up, I have these conversations with my kids, especially my son. I go, look, the reality is no matter how right or wrong you are, the place to argue is never on the side of the road. When you're in the streets and the cops being a jerk even, fine. Write the ticket. Yes, sir, no, sir, whatever you want. You're the man. This is why we have a court system. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments. and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, I come back to this, and the simple reality is we can do better. I think we have to do better. This is not something that can continue. It just seems out of hand. Let's go to the phones. We got Alice on line one. How you doing, Alice?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I wanted to tell you about my experience back in 2000 with the state policeman. The worst experience I've ever had in my life. I was going to work, and I lived, 13, 14 miles away from where I worked. And I got to an intersection, a main intersection, and this cop car with the lights comes flying up, blocking me because I was going to merge into the main highway. And I rolled the window down, and I said, "Excuse me, officer, is there an issue?" And he screamed, "Put your hands out the windows with your palms facing outward so I can see them." And I thought, oh, my God, what's going on here? So, of course I did this. Now, mind you, I am like I'm not even 5'2". So I'm thinking, do I look dangerous? And I said to him, what did I do? And he was like, "You almost hit me back there 12 miles ago." I'm like, what? He said, "You almost hit me head on." And I thought, I think I would have noticed it if I would have almost hit a black and white state police cruiser,
Wow.
I said, okay. So he said, "Let me see your license and registration." And I'd just gotten the automobile I was driving. It was like maybe 2 days old for me. And I said, "Well, I have the pink slip and my insurance card, but I just bought this." And I pulled out my wallet. I said, "I'm going to get my wallet." Got my wallet out to get my driver's license. He goes, "Let me see your other driver's license." And I looked at him, I said, "What other driver's license?" He said, "Your driver's license from the other state." I said, "What other state?"
So do you think you were somebody else?
Yeah, apparently that's what had happened. Somebody with a similar automobile or something. Anyways, he gave me a ticket, and the way he treated me then, I was like, I'm fighting this.
You fight everything.
And I had called when he went back to check my license and stuff. I hurried up and called work, and I said, "Look, I'm pulled over here. I don't know what in the world's going on. If I'm not there in 15 minutes, somebody call the state police and find out what's going on, because they have no clue." And when he came back, he wasn't quite as snippy and stuff what he was, and he'd put his gun back in the holster. I'm going to tell you what. He charged me with, I forget what it was. It was this humongous fine. Instead of just saying, so I called the next day. I called and talked to his commanding officer at the state police barracks, and told him the whole thing. And they ended up dropping it down to failure to stop and yield or something, instead of just saying, he thought you were somebody else. We had something going on, but yeah.
So why did you get a ticket for that?
I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
So
yeah, everyone's got one of those.
Share that with you.
No, I appreciate it, Alice. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
No, she hits on something that's interesting. Again, one of the things I tell my kids, if you ever get pulled over, turn on the lights inside the car, turn off the music, roll down the windows, hands firmly on the top of the steering wheel. You do not want to look like a threat in any way, shape, or form, to give any excuse for, and no sudden movements. Now, this is coming from an old white guy. Now, granted, I grew up in in a housing project where I was the minority in a minority community. So maybe that's part of it. But on the side of the road, you want them feeling as safe as they can possibly feel. And don't argue. That's not the place for it. Arguing with them on the side of the road, as I told my kid, you lose every time because you just don't. That's not the place for it. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays itself out. I want to get to. I came across this CNN poll that points out that 73% of us aren't paying. That are saying that the Republicans aren't paying enough attention to the real problems facing the country. Only 27% think the House Republicans have the right priorities, and it got me into this world of thinking that I'm hoping this moment where people are paying attention to this horrible tax scheme that they've thrown out there. Because look, I've been gutted. I've been just swamped with emails from people who are concerned about what the GOP's doing to make the lives of average everyday working people like you and me worse. And understand, as I say all the time, Republicans hate working people. Just look at what they're doing. Look at that tax sham. Look at their attacks on collective bargaining rights. Look at this debate ceiling debacle. The fact that they're going to use the debt ceiling to hold Social Security and Medicare hostage. That was interesting. I got a lengthy email from Mike that I wanted to spend a couple of seconds on. Because he pointed out, he said, look, I saw your interview with Alex Lawson of Social Security Works, talking about, Social Security and Medicare. And he said, look, this is the holy trinity of Republican hate: Medicare, Social Security, and I think he meant Medicaid. Because, these programs, as he points out, don't serve the corporate masters. There isn't a huge profit motive to be made. They can't put money in their pockets off of your misery or off of your retirement. They don't like that. And Republicans have been doing their foolhardy best over the years to privatize both. And as Mike points out, he says, I think Social Security may go the route of pensions and union shops, where old-timers get grandfathered into the current system, but those hired after such and such a date get at best a watered-down retirement program or 401k. That is not wrong. This is what they keep saying. Oh, you folks over 55, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. This is for down the road. We're gonna. If you remember, this was the privatization scheme. We're gonna set up all little accounts, and you're gonna have a 401k like kind of thing with your money in, and it's yours, and completely negating what Social Security is at its core. The most important, the best anti-poverty program ever devised. This took an entire segment of the population and said, we're going to put a line in the sand and no one's going to go below it. We're going to ensure that poverty for seniors is not a thing. And it did. It massively decreased the senior poverty in enormous ways. Look, I'm old enough to remember when you basically had poorhouses. My mother worked in a nursing home that was for the indigent, and it was a hellhole. And I don't ever want to see us go back to that. And Social Security and Medicaid are the parts that did that. Because Medicaid pays for old age care. If you're indigent, it will pay for your nursing care or to have somewhere to go in your old age. They want to destroy and privatize this by trying to convince the younger generation, oh, you'll see a UFO before you'll see a Social Security check, which is nonsense. Social Security is, if we do nothing, we'll pay out. I think it's like 7 or 8 years down the road, it will drop from 100% down to 75%, and then pay out forever. That's how the system is set up. We have a problem, and it's a good size problem, but the system itself is strong. What we have to do, this is the part, you have to put into it. Stop stealing from it. Had we not stolen all the money that we did from, the Johnson years back in the 60s, the Reagan era of the 80s, had we not, the Bush years, had we not done that, Social Security would be perfectly fine. But we get greedy politicians who just, it's like a bank. In fact, what was his name? Alan Simpson, the Simpson Bowles Commission, you remember during the Obama years, who said, we spent all that money. It's gone. We used it. So future generations are going to have to not have the security in old age that we should have. And understand, that has been the Republicans' wet dream list for a very long time. Privatize Social Security, put that money in the hands of Wall Street so, well, they can make money off of it. And as Mike points out, the attacks on Social Security, he says, are theoretical. I disagree. They're working their full-hearted best. But he points out that Medicare is something they've been attacking for decades. Go back to the Bush era and, the Medicare Advantage plans that sprang up. The privatized schemes you're going to get this private plan because private is so much better. Only, how did Medicare put it? 25% of seniors are on these privatized plans. 3/4 of seniors are on the traditional Medicare, and yet these Advantage plans cost more to pay for the 25% than what cost to pay for the 75%. And they don't get better outcomes. What they get are, some lots of profit, as Mike points out. He said, and of course, upcoding. And we've talked about upcoding in the past, where, hey, they're always looking for something to diagnose you for so they can charge more. And, the reality here is this is, and look, during the Trump years, they came up with another scheme to make it even worse. Republicans have done their foolhardy best to destroy these programs without anyone really knowing about it. And this is, again, this is where Democrats fall down on the job, because some of them are actually in favor of some of these bad ideas. We want to give people choice because we've bought this narrative that we should have choice. Choice is good. Well, the choice between bad and worse, is that a good choice? The choice between I'm going to get denied over here or denied over there, is that a good choice? No. We want one plan that's going to make sure that everyone gets the care that they need when they need and how they need it. That's what we should be striving for. Instead of all of these schemes and gimmicks and Band-Aids and half-baked, half-concocted ideas on, hey, we can do this, and if you stand on one foot on a Tuesday and it's raining in a snowstorm, you'll get covered. No, we want to make sure that there's a baseline. But the thread that goes through all of this stuff is the profit motive. There's nobody on the Republican side saying, no, we want to make sure that we have a social safety net that leaves nobody behind. We want to make sure that there's a social safety net that takes care of it. You don't hear that. You hear how much it costs, how much we can profit from it, how dependent people are. I'm shocked in this moment that Democrats aren't, with every voice, talking about the Republican plan to increase inflation with this 30% tax on this federal tax, 30% on everything. And this idea that we're going to hold the globe hostage to kill Social Security to save it. It's remarkable to me. And we should be Granny should be getting her walker all fired up to get out in the street. Because while you may be okay today, your children and grandchildren are going to be screwed. Also, a handful of very rich people can have a little bit more. This is my problem. This is the problem of where I'm at. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing Democrats coming out full-throatedly saying, look, Granny's worried, and she should be, because these people seriously want to destroy, that thing that keeps them alive, that keeps them having a little dignity and respect. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day Sid Hatfield and 22 other defendants went on trial for the murder of Detective Albert Phelps. Hatfield was chief of police in Matewan, West Virginia, when the United Mine Workers came to Mingo County to organize coal workers. The Stone Mountain Coal Company moved to smash union activity. They brought in Baldwin Felts detectives to evict union miners from company housing. Hatfield supported the miners' right to organize and urged locals to arm themselves. He confronted the detectives at the train depot as they were leaving town for the evening about the evictions they had just carried out. The detectives presented Hatfield with a phony arrest warrant. Surrounded by armed miners, a gun battle ensued, leaving at least 7 detectives and 4 townspeople dead in what is referred to as the Matewan Massacre. The trial was set in the Mingo County seat of Williamson, where Baldwin Felt's agents lined the streets to intimidate those sympathetic to Hatfield and the others. The prosecution hoped to prove that Felt's murder was premeditated and used the testimony of paid spies who had previously attempted to gain Hatfield's trust and friendship. According to historian James Green, author of The Devil is Here in These Hills, the ACLU had advised defense attorneys to turn the trial into a prosecution of the coal operators by introducing in evidence the entire record of their conspiracy to deny the citizens of West Virginia of their legal rights. The defense successfully discredited these paid agents and won acquittal. When Hatfield and his deputies arrived back in Matewan, they were greeted as heroes by the entire town. Hatfield, however, had a target on his back and would be gunned down a year later, sparking a coal war which ended with the Battle of Blair Mountain. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
High-dollar corporate executives and Wall Street bankers keep telling us that it's lonely at the top. Well, they should try toiling at the bottom of America's pay scale. The radical rise of inequality in our society is a function of the vast political inequality separating the working class from the power structure. The elite rich have many friends in high places, paying close attention to their needs, but the further one tumbles down the economic ladder, the lonelier you are when your interests conflict with the bosses and big shots. As Ray Charles sang, them that's got is them it gets. Consider waiters, bartenders, and other restaurant workers. Generally, these jobs are poorly paid and routinely abusive, yet lawmakers mostly ignore all that, cozying up to the abusers because, well, they're rich and politically connected. As a result, most of today's restaurant workers are paid a sub-minimum wage that was set 32 years ago at $2.13 an hour. That's not a wage, it's an insult. Yet most lawmakers refuse to raise it, bowing to the piles of campaign cash they get through a lobbying front called the National Restaurant Association, dominated by multi-billion-dollar food chains. Worse, in the past decade, this consortium of greedy wage suppressors even devised a diabolical scheme to make restaurant workers pay for the industry's lobbying campaigns to hold down wages. The association bought an outfit that provides hokey food safety training to workers. Then it lobbied to get California, Florida, Illinois, Texas, and other states to require that all employees not only undergo the silly online training course, but also making them pay $15 each for the training. This is Jim Hightower saying, guess what? NRA then uses these worker training fees to fund its lobbying efforts that let restaurants pay poverty wages. And that, kids, is how inequality happens.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a new Rasmussen poll out. I got to tell you, I'm loving the RNC pie fight. And again, this is one of these tests of how much power does Donald Trump still wield. Because he's in the I guess the Ronna McDaniel crowd. You've got DeSantis who's coming out saying, I like what this Harmeet Dillon person's saying. But this Rasmussen poll, my candidate is at the top of it. Mike Lindell, 30% of Republicans say they want him as the chair. Dillon, 20%. Ronna McDaniel's 15%. I don't know who the rest. They didn't go through that. But I'm really, just for the comedy of it, I want the pillow guy at the top of the RNC. What fun would that be? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the pie fight and, well, where we are, what's going on, and the McCarthy era. How are things going? That's why I've asked Jeff Timmer to come talk with us. Jeff is a political strategist and senior advisor with the Lincoln Project. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, Rick, thanks for having me on. I always love coming on and talking to you. And you know why?
Why is that?
You're one of the few people who's ever invited me back.
I think you do good work. I think you're a good guy. I think you're right most of the time. Policy-wise, we may disagree, but I think saving democracy is something or saving the country from the depths of insanity is something we share.
Well, it is important, but it's if you I like to do it with a bit of humor while we're doing it. It's important work. It's necessary. It's essential. We're at a precipice. We keep getting past the dangers, the kind of the immediate dangers, but then the new ones always arise.
Yeah.
And now we have this battle to lead the RNC. You see all these headlines. Oh, Trump's power and influence is waning. He's on all the evidence points to the exact opposite. He's as strong or stronger now in the Republican Party and in Republican circles than he ever has been. And he's played this RNC gambit just right. Rana was his handpicked choice to lead the RNC back when he won in 2016. She had chaired the Michigan Republican Party, somebody I know very well. She's Peter Principle in motion here. You rise to the level of your incompetence. Well, she has definitely surpassed her incompetence, and the last 3 election cycles has shown that. And it looked after the election like she was actually, even though she'd had her ass handed to her 3 straight election cycles, was going to be able to coast to a re-election. But lo and behold, Pillows McCrackpipe, jumps in the race. And now the National Committee woman from California, Dylan, I think she's going to win tomorrow. I really do. And I think Ron DeSantis was very careful and calculating with his endorsement of her today. And Donald Trump, I said, has played this very masterfully in the Trump way. Rana was his choice. He's been very lukewarm and hasn't been effusive in his endorsement of her and his support of her.
Right.
So that whatever happens tomorrow, he's going to claim that's what I wanted.
No, he's somebody who knows, and this is where you have to give him credit. And I know some of my liberal friends are going to be, how dare you say nice things about him? But there's a guy who, when he puts his finger to the wind, he knows which way it's blowing.
Well, and it's usually because he hedges his bets. And so he'll say, if somehow Mike Lindell, and it's not going to be Mike Lindell, this isn't, the Republican voters don't get to choose this. It's members of the National Committee. Each state has 3 members. Each state and U.S. territory, including like the Marshall Islands and the Virgin Islands, have delegates that vote for this. So there's just a small number of Republican insiders, and the choice is going to come down between Ronna McDaniel and Hermit Dillon. And I really think that the way this has evolved, that Ronna started the race in November at the highest point she was ever at, and she's done nothing but lose support since. And I think today, Ron DeSantis made what he thinks is a shrewd move to kind of come sliding in, but he sees the writing on the wall. So he's going with somebody he is fairly certain is going to win, so that he can start to show that this is going to be his party. But Donald Trump is also going to be able to claim that that Dillon, who's a big Trump supporter, big MAGA, big America first, was his choice all along. Or if Ronna wins, that she was his choice all along. Or certainly if Mike Lindell wins, he's Trump's choice too.
Yeah, no, look, he's masterful at this, because you can never hammer him down, and even when he's caught in a lie, he never apologizes and never backs up. That really is the mastery of what the current Republican Party has been able to get away with. Nobody. There's no shame. There's no conscience. So if you're shameless, there's no consequence.
Yeah. Well, everyone always says, "Well, we have the receipts." Trump doesn't care if you have the receipts. He just doesn't care. He'll just lie. He won the golf tournament. He wasn't even there, for a couple of days of it, but he won anyway. This is the way Trump, that's how he rolls.
Yeah, I'm waiting for, if you remember old Kim Jong-il, he played golf, had 18 holes in one. Every time he went bowling, rolled a 300, and people bought it. I see. I don't think we're that far down the road yet with Trumpism, but you talk to some supporters, they're all in. They bought the shirt, man.
Right. Well, Trump is strong like 10 men, and it's your duty to bear him many sons.
Well, there is that. So I also want to get your thoughts on Kevin McCarthy. He got his wish. I wanted him to be speaker. I want for him the heartburn and the acid reflux that's going to come with Marjorie Trainwreck Green and the others constantly holding over him. We're going to steal this from you at any moment. I want to get your assessment of the first couple of weeks of the McCarthy reign. How do you put this?
Well, it's gone exactly as you could predict. He had to sell every last modicum of integrity and character that he may have ever possessed in order to achieve his goal of getting the speaker's gavel. In order to do so, he had to give every bit of power to the crazies in his caucus, and that battle that we all watched unfold, the 15 ballots in order to elect the speaker, it made it look like it was 20 loons against 200 normal people, and that's really what I think is a danger, because those 200, 132 of those 200 are election deniers, voted to not to certify the last election. Yeah. We're normalizing the abnormal because there's 20 people who are even crazier than the people who are completely crazy and authoritarian. So right there, he's leading a caucus that is crazier, more authoritarian, and more dangerous than the caucus that existed 2 years ago and certainly 4 years ago. There are more Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Matt Gaetzes among the new crop of representatives who came in January, people whose names we don't know yet.
Oh no, they're elbowing
crazier.
No, and they're elbowing to get to the front of the pack. You know, I was saying before, you can look at Marjorie Three Names, you can look at Gun Fetish Barbie, you can look at some of these. They're now normalized. They're now where I'm amazed by it, but they are now the heart and soul of your former party.
They're the mainstream, and it's the people like a Mitt Romney or a Liz Cheney or an Adam Kinzinger who are the extreme fringe elements of the Republican Party, and it's Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene who are the mainstream Republicans these days, and they have something that they can use to control Kevin McCarthy as they go forward.
I mean, the fact that
well, if you know what that is, if you remember the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, where Michael Caine says to Steve Martin as they're in the midst of a con, he says, "Ruprecht, don't make me get out the genital cuff." That's how they control Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, no, yeah, because there's a story this week. Evidently, he's having an affair with one of his male staffers, something along these lines.
Well, that's Gaetz. Yeah, that's supposedly Gaetz, not McCarthy.
No, Gaetz. You brought up Gaetz. Yeah. And I thought the genital cups, Gaetz.
Well, it looks like what we saw, kind of the dismantling of Madison Cawthorn, the North Carolina guy who was the Trump guy, the paraplegic, who the Republicans decided he was too extreme, too crazy for them. They took him out with a drip of just a whole bunch of awful things that he had done, salacious things. And it looks like you would think that the sex trafficking of minors would have been enough to take out Matt Gaetz, but not in this Republican Party. They need to, bring in a same-sex relationship before anybody gets their nose out of joint.
Is that what is that going to take it? Because I'm like, okay, fine. If it's consensual, I don't care. That's probably the best thing about him, I guess. It's his policies and the stuff that he wants to do to this country I have a problem with. Just look at this last week of the tax scheme. We're going to raise taxes on everybody 30% on sales tax. The attack on Social Security that's coming. That's the stuff that I'm interested in. The sideshow of what these people are doing behind closed doors, I could care less. It's about how they're going to affect the lives of workers, and that to me is the most offensive of all.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's so much going on. There's so many sideshows that we get distracted by those bright, shiny things, whether it's George Santos and the complete and utter lunacy. I mean, the guy seems like an AI character that's made up, completely out of fiction. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't even exist in real life, that he's a hologram of some kind. But, whether it's Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene, and any of the sensational stuff they do, it takes people's eyes off of the real dangers. And it's the 30% increase on everything that you buy. Really, that's the way to deal with inflation? That seems a little counterintuitive. The cutting Social Security and Medicare. Yeah, so you have to work until you're 72 or 75, and people like working, and so it's just wrong, and it's disrespectful to the people who have earned their retirement and paid into their retirement, that the Republicans, rather than actually confront the spending, rather than look at serious reforms, they're just looking to put the burden onto the people who've paid into the system and are now counting on it to be there for them.
It's amazing. It's amazing, the gimmicks. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Jeff Timmer. Jeff's a political strategist and senior advisor with the Lincoln Project. You can check out their website, projectlincoln.us. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, for me, again, this is one of those, I have people all the time tell me, and I'm sure you get this too, Jeff. Yeah, they're all corrupt. Both parties are the same. And I'm going, no, I don't know. I watched your governor's speech. You're in Michigan. I watched Governor Whitmer's speech yesterday talking about how we're going to help seniors, how we're going to help families, how we're going to actually get some stuff done. I see them as having some actual policies, and we can argue about those policies, but things that are going to move, hopefully make lives better. I look at the sideshow and the cruelty on the other side, and I don't know how you could make that statement that they're all alike. I'm curious. Your thoughts on Whitmer's speech yesterday?
Well, I think it was a terrific speech, and I think she's done a great job. She's a model for other Democrats, especially in purple states, to look at how to govern in a way that co-ops the middle. She's certainly a progressive in her policies, but she's done and deliberately done a lot of outreach to the business community. She had tremendous support from business leaders in Michigan. Major business groups like the Detroit Chamber of Commerce supported her reelection. There was a huge group of Republicans for Whitmer. Many former elected officials and administration officials from previous Republican governors supported her. And that's really, and it's not because they agree. I was one of them. It's not because I agree with her on every single policy issue, but she's somebody you can sit down and have a reasonable discussion with and come up with a reasonable solution and compromise. We also don't really have the luxury in today's politics of sitting down and gnawing about all the ins and outs of particular policies when democracy itself is at risk. And she's a great defender of democracy. And I think she's a model for other governors around the state or around the country to follow.
Yeah, is she in the mix if Biden decides not to run, or any thoughts?
Well, I think personally, I'd like to see her run. I think she would bring a tremendous insight and experience that has often been lacking in national politics. Politics from the heartland, from the Midwest, as opposed to the coasts. I think that there is, some element of that discussion that is often lost in the Democratic Party nationally. And I think, people like Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer are people that should be looked at more by national Democrats in the unlikely event that Joe Biden doesn't run for re-election.
Yeah, Shapiro down the road. I want to see what he does as governor. I like Josh. He's been on this program a number of times. He was an incredible attorney general. Loved him in that role. I think he's going to do a great job as governor, maybe down the road. But Whitmer, going to be interesting to see how the next couple of years go, because you said Michigan's a purple state. I'm looking at it going, it's looking like it's leaning the other way after this last election, and we'll find out more in 24. Also wanted to get your thoughts over the fight over Debbie Stabenow announcing she's going to retire.
Well, that's a seat where a Senate map that is already difficult for Democrats. They have to play a lot of defense in tough states. The key electoral vote states have Democrats running for re-election, like Pennsylvania, like Michigan. Well, Michigan, she's retiring. Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, but then there's also those Ohio and Montana and West Virginia. So there's a lot of defense the Democrats are playing. And the Republicans are going to be enticed to spend heavy in Michigan. Now, the Republicans have a problem. They don't have a very deep bench. The choices they have are a bunch of losers who've crazy MAGA candidates who've lost, whether it's Tudor Dixon, who was destroyed by Whitmer in the last election, or John James, who lost 2 previous runs for the U.S. Senate. They have a pretty shallow bench, but the Democrats have a kind of an abundance of talent. Other statewide elected officials, the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. Those are the two names talked about most. And Slotkin seems very certain to run. In fact, there was an article to this afternoon that she's expected to announce any day that she is in fact running. And she has won arguably the most purple district in the U.S. House now 3 times, and won it with solid fashion because she's a solid Democrat who makes effort to appeal to centrist and center-right voters on many issues.
No, but I'm looking at this, and again, I come back to, this past week and what the Republicans in the House put forth their priorities. I mean, this is showing this isn't Texas Hold'em. They put their cards right on the table. We're coming after Social Security. We're coming after Medicare. We're going to cause massive inflation by proposing. None of this stuff's going to actually happen because there's a Senate that won't allow it. There's a president that's going to veto it. But it's their priorities. This is what they're saying. We know it's not going to pass. This is what we're showing you our hand. I don't know how working people look at this and go, "I'm sorry, you're all crazy. There's nothing I can vote for here."
Yeah. Well, it really seems it's unfortunate that we have to go through these kind of theatrics with the House Republicans, but it might be the wake-up call that America needs, that the pro-democracy majority of Americans, and I think it's a pretty solid number, it's kind of the galvanizing reminder that we all need that these guys are a bunch of kooks and we can't vote for them again.
That's a simple way. And this debt ceiling debacle is a part of it. I mean, my Congressman Scott Perry, right at the center of being one of those 20 kooks. I think there is a number of Republicans right now who in this debt, and I want to get your thoughts if you think this is different than 2011 and maybe why. But I think they really want to shoot the hostage. I really do. I think they're hell bent on touching the hot thing, pressing the button to see if. Let's see if it really does melt down the global economy and cause a massive depression across the world. I think there are people now who seriously want that.
Yeah, in 2011. There were still the grown-ups in charge of the Republican Party. And you can say what you want about people like John Boehner or Paul Ryan and that ilk, but they understood what governing meant, and they understood those things that they had to do for political theater, and they understood what when it push came to shove, that they had to deliver votes to avoid crisis. And you're right, there's no awareness and there's no concern in today's Republicans in the House about any of that, and the grown-ups are not in charge. Even if in his feeble mind, if Kevin McCarthy believes that his role is to be like John Boehner in 2011, he will not withstand the day if he tries to cut a deal with the White House or the Senate. That Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of those Scott Perrys and kooks don't sign off on. They hold him hostage every moment of every day.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's almost that I miss the days of Newt Gingrich and the contract on America. As bad as those policies were, at least they were policies, and at least they were serious about doing this. Even if I thought they were horrible, at least they were something you could debate. This stuff, they're grabbing the third rail with both hands.
Yeah, all they care about is breaking things and getting attention. They don't care about accomplishing anything. They don't care about implementing any kinds of policies. They have no ideology. They have no personal moorings. And all they want to do is maintain power and get hits on Fox News and likes on their social media.
That's it, like a 2-year-old in a china shop. But Jeff, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing some thoughts with you. It's always great. I hope folks will check out your podcast. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at the A Republic podcast. We'll get that out on social media. Jeff, appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that President Theodore Roosevelt signed into law an effort to get corporate money out of national politics. The law was called the Tillman Act. The act was named after its chief sponsor, Senator Benjamin Tillman of South Carolina. President Roosevelt had fallen under public criticism for taking corporate money in his 1904 run for office. After he won the race, he included the issue in his address to Congress. Teddy said, "All contributions by corporations to any political committee for any political purpose should be forbidden by law." The resulting Tillman Act covered national banks and corporations, but the act had no real enforcement provisions. Since the passage of the Tillman Act, Congress has moved to further regulate campaign financing more than 10 times. Labor union contributions were regulated for the first time during World War II. During the war, unions were strictly prohibited from direct political donations. During the 1944 election, for the first time, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, set up a political action committee. The PAC was to support pro-labor candidates and legislation. 3 years later, however, limits on union political spending were beefed up even further by the Taft-Hartley Act. The role of corporations and unions in campaign finance continues to be a hotly contested issue. In 2010, the United States Supreme Court decided the landmark case Citizens United. Their decision ruled that money equals speech. Corporations and unions can spend as much as they want on elections as long as they don't coordinate directly with individual campaigns. This has led to a flood of money by very wealthy donors into super PACs. More than a century after the passage of the Tillman Act, we still have not solved the question of election financing.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Real quick, Jenny sent me an email pointing out that the 538 blog evidently is being either sold or disbanded. She said it's one of her favorite sites and pointed out something I thought was interesting. You wonder why there isn't a lot of left and center media. Evidently, this 538 blog, which I guess loses like $6 million a year on $3 million revenue. So somehow, I guess it's an ESPN offering. They're trying to sell it. They lose tons of money. Media is expensive. Doing these kind of programs are expensive. And I had a bunch of people say, the reason is U.S. media is based on advertisers and what consumers buy, and liberals don't buy stuff, and that's all convoluted. The reality is our wealth class is willing to lose money to put out their message, whereas as the other side, the left, the center doesn't. It's about actual capitalist principles. You got to pay the bills. There isn't a billionaire behind them writing checks, because if you look at cable news, there isn't an awful lot of ads that are saying, "Hey, buy our stuff," like you would expect. It's a lot of front group money, pushing an ideology. It's a lot of billionaire cash to set up, to keep them afloat. To do what? To use the Bush quote, catapult the propaganda. Because they understand being in your ear 24/7, regurgitating these simple talking points that come out of their think tanks, all of this coordination to get in your head to say, hey, unions are bad. Any government program that's going to help poor people, bad. Any social safety net, bad. Private corporations, good. Private corporations always act in their own best interest, and they do. Their best interest being profit for them and, less for you. This is where, again, it's masterful what they've done. They know how to spend their money that they don't pay in taxes. They spend it on brainwashing us so that we don't think they shouldn't have to pay taxes. It's masterful. Masterful. Anyway, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Happens in the oceans doesn't stay in the oceans.
Spate of new studies finds climate impacts are escalating. Forest Service bans logging in Alaskan rainforest again. Plus,
it is now 90 seconds to midnight.
Scientists move metaphoric doomsday clock closer to catastrophe.
All of that metaphoric doomsday and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Xbox has also announced they're going woke too, because of climate change, that they're adding a new feature to their default setting, and it will turn off after so long to save the environment, the power.
It automatically turns off when you're not using it to save energy and save you money? Sounds terrible, Fox News. That's going woke? I'd say don't change, but I know you never will. This is your Green News Report.
Ted Cruz writes on Twitter, first gas stoves, then your coffee, now you're gunning for my Xbox.
Isn't it crazy, though? Okay, Desi Doyen, let the metaphorical doomsday begin.
Yes, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock to 90 seconds to midnight this week. That's the closest that the metaphoric measure of existential threats to humanity has ever been to disaster. Board member Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, said the new clock time reflects increased nuclear risks from Russia's invasion of Ukraine and, of course, climate.
The illegal invasion of a sovereign state by a nuclear-armed permanent member of the UN Security Council, together with the acceleration of the climate crisis, explains why the clock has now been moved even closer to midnight.
Well, we know why it's been moved closer to midnight. Only question is, what the hell is anyone going to do about it?
The scientists also cited the lingering pandemic and the breakdown of global norms and the institutions needed to address risks as putting humanity at greater risk of self-destruction.
Other than that, everything is fine.
And a series of recent studies this month underscore the escalating dangers of man-made global warming. First, researchers with Carnegie Mellon University found that the world's glaciers are shrinking and disappearing faster than predicted, so much so that even if governments meet ambitious global climate targets, the world is still likely to lose half of its glaciers by 2100, with substantial impacts on global sea levels and population migration. A second study has found that the oceans last year were the hottest ever recorded since comprehensive records began in the 1950s. It also confirmed ocean warming has accelerated since 1990. The oceans absorb about 90% of the excess heat trapped by humanity's greenhouse gas emissions. It matters because hotter oceans turbocharge extreme weather like hurricanes, torrential rains, and floods, increase sea level rise, and affect rainfall patterns on land. As lead study author, climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann told MSNBC,
worsened drought, worsened heat, greater heat, worse floods, superstorms. This is the face of climate change. It's not subtle. It's not far away. The impacts are being felt by us now on a daily basis. It's simply a matter of how bad we're willing to let it get.
And it's not just the oceans. A new study this week reports exceptional warming in Greenland, with the Greenland ice sheet hitting its hottest temperature in 1,000 years. The eastern Horn of Africa just saw an unprecedented fifth straight year of failed rains, making it the longest and most severe drought in 70 years of precipitation data.
I thought you said this doomsday was supposed to be metaphorical.
But there is some encouraging news.
Oh, nice.
Full data from 2022 is not in yet, but according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, it appears that last year was the first year in which the U.S. got more electricity from renewables than from coal. Globally, the world appears to have reached peak fossil fuels for electricity, with wind and solar now the cheapest sources of electricity for 96% of the world's population, according to nonprofit group Rocky Mountain Institute. And finally, great news, the U.S. Forest Service has banned logging and mining development in more than half of Alaska's Tongass National Forest. The action reverses a Trump-era rollback and reinstates the roadless rule for the Tongass, one of the largest temperate rainforests in the the world. It also ends large-scale logging across the entire Tongass, ensuring it continues to provide critical habitat for birds, wildlife, and salmon, and preserves the capacity of the ancient forest to absorb a significant chunk of humanity's carbon emissions.
Well, that seals it. With all that good news, I'm moving that clock back a few seconds. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, the Twitters, and the Mastodons at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I saw this thing about M&Ms and now Xboxes that have got all the righties all losing their minds. You know, who's the snowflake again? Did I miss something? I don't know. Yeah, the purple M&Ms have got people all enraged. Yeah, but the good thing is, you know, Maya Rudolph now going to be the spokesperson for M&Ms in the Super Bowl commercial. So got her a gig. Good for her. But how do you get upset about a purple M&M? I don't. Personally, if I saw a purple M&M, I think it was just sat in the bag too long. I would probably still eat it though, because M&Ms are good, even though they're made by a company that's not unionized. But here to share some thoughts on the M&M gate. That's our good friend Sarah Burris to come share some thoughts. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website, if you want to check out her stuff. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, happy Thursday.
Would you eat purple M&Ms?
Totally. I mean, I do every Easter. Have you looked at the Easter M&Ms? They're all like pink and blue and purple and fun and whatever. I think what I had heard about the purple M&M controversy is that I think Tucker Carlson thought she looked obese, except that she's a peanut M&M, and I'm like, what did you think was in there? Like, do you think it's just fat or something? Do you think she needs to do some sit-ups? And she's not real, also. Like, that's the thing.
But again, who's the snowflake again?
I know. I don't understand. That's the whole thing. Like, all of these bizarre conspiracies and the gas stove thing, like I haven't heard about any of this until Republicans start talking about it, and it's like I feel like I'm kind of in with the whole, you know, liberal crowd of people. I feel like if this really was a legitimate thing, I would know it, and that's how I can tell if they're making stuff up or not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I go to my George Soros funded meetings, we're not talking about purple M&Ms and Xboxes, are we?
Our special George Soros orgies and satanic worship fest.
I mean, seriously, I mean, they've created this environment that thinks anyone that isn't as extreme as they are, you know, belongs to these kind of cult groups that thinks about M&Ms and indoctrinating children over global warming with Xboxes. I'm going, no, it just makes sense when things are left on. When I was a kid, my mother was like, turn the damn lights off. When you leave a room, turn the lights off. When you're not playing the game, turn the damn thing. Now we've got the technology; it'll turn itself off. I'm game.
Right. I mean, there was the whole thing about you know, don't leave the door open or you're going to air condition the whole neighborhood. You know, stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, that's just a financial thing. That's a normal, I think about like growing up in redneck Oklahoma. It's like, do people there, I haven't talked to any folks about this, so I have no idea, but are people there looking at this and thinking like it's some sort of crazy conspiracy to now all of a sudden turn your lights off? Or yeah, I mean, that's just good financial sense.
No, I remember my mother, when you were born in a barn. Well, you should known. Yeah. I was you were there,
right? Nay, I was not born in a barn.
Well, there is that. There is that. But the thing is, the thing that bothers me is this is the kind of stuff that they spend so much time on. Feeding the outrage candy, not purple M&M candy, but feeding the outrage candy to people who get all upset. And the real stuff that matters never seems to get any real attention. For instance, you may remember that this John Durham was supposed to be the attack dog for Trump and for Billy Barr, was gonna drill down to the bottom and find the Russian hoaxers, and got nothing. In fact, a couple of acquittals, nothing. And I guess they're now closing the investigation, with nothing.
Not only nothing, my favorite piece of this that I feel like was just sort of nested in that story is that at one point Durham met with some representatives of the Italian government to ask about, the whole Russian conspiracy thing. And they're like, yeah, we don't know anything about that. But now that you're here, we have a whole bunch of information about financial crimes that Donald Trump did involving Italy. Who do we give this to? And it's like, oh my God, you guys. And that piece of it, I feel like it was kind of dismissed, and Americans didn't find out about that because, oh wow, look, it was right before the election. And so there's a lot of stuff in this, that was involved in that. And I think that happened in the Justice Department under Bill Barr that I feel like warrants a larger investigation. And it seems so silly to be like, well, let's investigate the investigators who are investigating the investigation. But it's kind of where I am at this point, where it's like, can we not have any corruption? Like, is it possible that we have some reasonable level of ethics and responsibility in the Justice Department? Is that too much to ask for at this point?
Yeah, I mean, but there's part of me that goes, can we just, collectively have a moment of, let's have a reset.
Yeah.
Let's go from this point forward. Maybe a mass amnesiac. I don't know, because that there are so many investigations and so much stuff, and it's all meant to just rip us apart. Because you couldn't have written a bad script of what those 4 years were. Yeah,
you really couldn't. I mean, it's kind of like the George Santos stuff, where you could write a movie about this, some sort of political movie about this, and you take it to Hollywood, and they'd be like, yeah, nobody's going to believe this. And that's sort of like what the Trump campaign was or the Trump White House was for 4 years. And we're still suffering the after effects of that.
No, one of my favorite movies.
We will for some time.
No, one of my favorite movies is Idiocracy. And I'm going, that seems pretty, well, that seems like today. Because it doesn't seem far-fetched. And when it came out, it's like, wow, you could have done more with it. But you go, well, I hope we don't get there. We're there.
Yeah, I feel like there were better ethics in Animal House.
You mean when the Germans attacked Pearl Harbor, or what did Belushi say? Oh, are you waiting for the next bit of entertainment, the State of the Union coming up? Because evidently lawmakers are bringing guests.
God, I completely forgot about that part of the thing, and it's going to be such a cluster and it's going to be a joke. I mean, that's the thing, is you've got so many members of Congress who are already a joke, and so they're going to treat this as a ridiculous thing. And I don't know. It's just, I'm so over this already. And we're only a month into it. I'm over this Congress.
Yeah, I'm with you. But, the thing is, and I go back to, how much outrage came out of when Joe Wilson yelled out, "You lie," to where I'm expecting people to start throwing tomatoes or something. I'm expecting the Idiocracy I'm expecting that. This is how far down the hole we've fallen.
Honestly, I think if they did something like that, it would work out more in Joe Biden's favor than anything. Any point at which they start making a fool of themselves, screaming stuff, throwing stuff, the more that they behave badly, I think the worse it makes them look. And they haven't figured that out yet. But everybody's mom is just like, sit down, be quiet, be polite.
Everyone's, because I guess it's maybe
every normal mother out there is be polite.
The caveat.
You're a guest. Be polite. Wear something nice. Wash your face. Wear clean underwear. These are the things that I feel like I've been told my entire life.
As you should. That's that's what a good parent does. You want to have some bit of morals, some bit of ethics, some bit of, well, we're talking about Republicans here. Never mind. Sorry. And I hate saying that. But I look at this clown show and wow, and no bigger clown show going on right now than tomorrow the RNC going to elect a new leader. Will it be Ronna McDaniel? Will it be this Harmeet Dillon? Or will it be my guy? I want the pillow guy. I am so hoping for the pillow guy.
Oh, man. I wonder if Mike Lindell takes over the Republican Party, does that mean that every registered Republican gets a free pillow? Like, how does that work? Because from what I understand, they're also subpar pillows. So, no, I mean,
everybody I know who's ever had one said they're garbage. Yeah.
So does that mean the entire country is going to have a crick in their neck for like a couple of weeks before they figure out what it was? I feel like that is a form of terrorism right there. Just make the entire country feel really uncomfortable for a few weeks.
See, that might get them upset because evidently, the threats of creating a 30% federal sales tax, which would just send inflation through the roof, and Granny would be screwed because, well, you're paying sales tax where you weren't really paying a lot of income tax, and then wanting to cut Social Security and all of that. It seems like that would be something to motivate people to get out in the streets and be a little angry and get upset. But, maybe your idea of just being uncomfortable with a pillow is better.
Perhaps. I think the thing with the sales tax is I don't know how real of a proposal it was because it was already withdrawn pretty quickly.
It was 132 pages. They put some thought into it.
Somebody did. But when it came time for everybody to talk about, like, is this going to actually happen? And once Democrats spent an actual day, attacking it, within 24 hours after the press conferences Democrats held, Republicans were like, yeah, no, we're pulling this.
And this is where Democrats have got to not let up. You got to get out there and go. You remember what they wanted to do? They wanted. Yeah. This is what Republicans do masterfully. In fact, you got to find Granny who checked herself into a mental health clinic because of anxiety because she was so afraid that they were going to cut her Social Security and make her a poster child. Because this is what Republicans do. They do it masterfully.
Well, and we're about to walk into, a government shutdown because they've decided that they're not gonna raise the debt ceiling come hell or high water. So, or the only way that they would raise the debt ceiling is if they made cuts to Social Security and Medicare. So, you lose either way on the Republican plan. And I don't know if it's going to be one of those debt ceiling fights like what we had with Donald Trump. I really hope not, but it might be.
Yeah, no, see, I think we're in a moment right now where, we've been, every time there's one of these, we went through it during the Obama years. Every time there was a ticking bomb, they would take it down to the last minute and then something would happen we averted crisis. I really believe that, people have listened to that and going, how bad could it be? And there are people who are in our Congress right now who literally want to shoot the hostage. They want to see what happens when let's see what happens when we default. How bad could it be?
Right, it's true. And the thing is I think a lot of folks who lived through the Obama stuff, the Trump stuff was more recent, I think, and that was so long. Like, that was the longest shutdown in history. And I mean, it was a disaster for the Republicans. It was really embarrassing. And that was the infamous picture of Pelosi wagging her finger at Trump over the table. And the sunglasses, like, she came out of the White House and put the sunglasses on, and that was a huge thing. So I mean, I remember Democrats just winning that big and Republicans looking really terrible. And over again, every time this happens, we keep telling them, you're costing more money in the end.
Yeah.
This is costing the country, the taxpayers. This makes the economy worse every time you do it. And I don't think that they care.
No, I think that's the point. Again, I think they want recession. I think they don't want inflation to come down. I think they want all of the negatives so that they can say it's all Joe Biden's fault. I can't tell you how many times I get emails from people going, gas prices are this and it's all Joe Biden's fault. Egg prices, the egg thing. You got Marsha Blackburn running around saying, people are going to Mexico to get eggs because of Joe Biden. And I'm going, no, we've got a major avian flu outbreak in our chicken supply. And oh, by the way, corporations are gouging our eyes out with massive profits. How about we talk about that? No, that's Joe Biden's fault. No, it's corporate problems. Yeah. It's those criminals that are robbing us blind.
It is. It's absolutely the problem. And I mean, there are a lot of small farms and farmers markets where you can go get reasonably priced eggs. So I encourage folks to actually do that. I've got a bunch of friends who have chickens right now. So including ones that actually live in the city limit chickens.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a kind of an unrealistic expectation of how much eggs cost because of that. But, get some chickens.
But here again, the point being for me is you got Marsha Blackburn, who should know better.
She should know better. I think she does. She just doesn't care.
And this is
it's the
my
same
point.
Thing that she's talking about all this crap on the border. I mean, like all of her, every single time she talks about the border, she's like, Joe Biden is messing up the border because we just seized, another giant shipment of fentanyl. And it's like, oh yeah, Joe Biden seized fentanyl again. And you say that's a bad thing. And I mean, like she keeps saying stuff like this over and over again. And I don't know if it's just like the world's worst social media person or if she's, just truly that clueless, but I can't imagine somebody could really be that stupid. But Marsha Blackburn, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
She's the Michelle Bachmann of the South, I guess.
And I so miss Michelle Bachmann. Do you remember when Crazy was fun?
Oh, the crazy eyes on Time Magazine.
Yeah.
Oh,
we'll
never get over that.
I pine for the days of Michelle Bachmann kind of crazy. Because I viewed her always as kind of fun crazy, not horribly cruel, mean. Maybe she is, but at least
the thing about Michelle Bachmann is you knew she was never going anywhere. She was never going to get like a big career. She was never going to become like some big, huge Sarah Palin like person. And so it was fun. It was more fun that way. But when you have somebody like, Sarah Palin, who is a vice presidential running mate or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is the new BFF of the speaker and people are talking about as a vice presidential candidate, like that's where stuff gets scary and real.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. I want to get your final thoughts on. Have you checked your closets? Do you have any classified documents? Anything laying around you might want to share with us?
I do not have any classified documents that I have been able to find. However, I have heard that they are finding a lot of documents in the homes that Jimmy Carter built for Habitat for Humanity.
You used it for insulation?
So, yeah.
No, it's
I
one
don't
of
even
those...
keep my own documents. Like, that's the thing. It's like, I don't keep half of my stuff. I'm trying to sell my car right now, and I can't find my title. So, to order a new one. Like, this is I don't do paper. I try and keep paper out of my life because it just ends up collecting dust somewhere.
No, I hear you, but this is one of those stories where now I get stuff from all of my Republican listeners saying, well, if you're gonna go after Donald Trump, you got to go after Joe Biden, and now Mike Pence, obviously, and I'm sure there's going to be more down the line. Do we have a problem with our documents?
There have been a couple of folks that have talked about an overclassification of documents. I'm not aware enough about the classification system to know if that's necessarily the case, but all of the intelligence senators are kind of saying this is a problem. It's been a problem. We've been talking about this being a problem for a while. I think this is a perfect example of it. Another piece of it too, I think, is it's an antiquated system. That's something that Ron Wyden talked about whenever we caught up with him at the Capitol was, this is something from the dark ages. Why are there still pieces of paper? Why is this not an electronic format or like a barcode on it where you can scan and track every place that the document has been? I mean, there are a lot of different options that you could go to that just seems like a really old system that has outlived its usefulness.
Yeah, it's Well, we'll see. The difference, though, is, and as I tell everyone, there's a huge difference. Pence, Biden, both said, well, yeah, here, we got him, take him back. The other guy, every justification under the book. And this most recent one last week is my favorite. They were pretty envelopes. They were pretty folders. Who doesn't love pretty folders with words on them?
Every time he would have a meeting, he would collect the folders because he thought that they were pretty. Like, oh, that is the biggest BS I've ever heard in my life.
Everyone repurposes manila folders. You know that.
Right? Like, who wasn't sitting in that meeting thinking, God, if only I had an Expandy file in my life, it would be so much better.
There you go.
Really?
Sarah, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Have an awesome weekend. See you later.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Quick email from Jason. Jason says, hopefully Democrats are not looking to cut neoliberal deals like administrations of the past. Looking at you, Obama, after making the Bush tax cuts permanent, and Bill, who did the welfare reform. And look, this is one of the things I've been saying about Biden that I'm happy about. It looks like we're moving away from that neoliberal kind of corporate dealings. Now look, you know, as another emailer pointed out, Biden appointing Andrew Biggs to the Social Security Board is really troubling. Heritage Foundation guy who hates Social Security. I don't know why you would put someone like that on the board. But it's one of those things where you go, we got to keep pressure on them. We got to keep pressure on them to say, no cuts. No cuts to Social Security. In fact, we should be expanding Social Security. The way forward for working people in this country is to ensure that there's a basis for dignified retirement, for security in old age in both health and income. And that's the mastery of what Social Security and Medicare have given our seniors. And we want to make sure that continues into the future. Don't do what's been allowed to happen to generations of workers over the last couple of generations, where we took away defined benefit pensions that said when you retire, you will get this much money till you die, to these contribution plans that go, oh, well, you know, if you can save money, you'll give you a tax break, knowing that the vast majority of people don't have the resources to put aside. And that's okay with corporate America, because, you know, I love those when, well, we'll match up to 6% of whatever you put in. Now, personally, I would find it. If that, for me, that's free money. But there are folks who, you know, at the bottom end of the scale, they don't have that 6%. So that's a huge savings for these companies going, hey, we don't have to pay. We can claim we have a pension, but we don't actually have to pay for it. And then there's no responsibility on their part. No responsibility to manage it, no responsibility to ensure that it does well. That's on the individual. And what Wall Street loves more than anything, what they love is the individual. Because the wolf gets the sheep. And who's the sheep? Well, the poor working stiff who isn't keeping up with the market every day. So when things collapse, who gets hit the hardest? The poor and the working class, with what little they have in it. just my thoughts. Thanks for the email, Jason. If you want to email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com is my email. I do answer all emails personally, some of them right here on the program. But again, this is one of those moments. Got to keep the pressure on. Got to make sure that our elected officials know exactly where we are. And we should be hounding them and beating them up over these bills that they've put forth. Anyway, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that President Theodore Roosevelt signed into law an effort to get corporate money out of national politics. The law was called the Tillman Act. The act was named after its chief sponsor, Senator Benjamin Tillman of South Carolina. President Roosevelt had fallen under public criticism for taking corporate money in his 1904 run for office. After he won the race, he included the issue in his address to Congress. Teddy said, "All contributions by corporations to any political committee for any political purpose should be forbidden by law." The resulting Tillman Act covered national banks and corporations, but the act had no real enforcement provisions. Since the passage of the Tillman Act, Congress has moved to further regulate campaign financing more than 10 times. Labor union contributions were regulated for the first time during World War II. During the war, unions were strictly prohibited from direct political donations. During the 1944 election, for the first time, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, set up a political action committee. The PAC was to support pro-labor candidates and legislation. 3 years later, however, limits on union political spending were beefed up even further by the Taft-Hartley Act. The role of corporations and unions in campaign finance continues to be a hotly contested issue. In 2010, the United States Supreme Court decided the landmark case Citizens United. Their decision ruled that money equals speech. Corporations and unions can spend as much as they want on elections as long as they don't coordinate directly with individual campaigns. This has led to a flood of money by very wealthy donors into super PACs. More than a century after the passage of the Tillman Act, we still have not solved the question of election financing.
High-dollar corporate executives and Wall Street bankers keep telling us that it's lonely at the top. Well, they should try toiling at the bottom of America's pay scale. The radical rise of inequality in our society is a function of the vast political inequality separating the working class from the power structure. The elite rich have many friends in high places, paying close attention to their needs, but the further one tumbles down the economic ladder, the lonelier you are when your interests conflict with the bosses and big shots. As Ray Charles sang, "Them that's got is them it gets." Consider waiters, bartenders, and other restaurant workers. Generally, these jobs are poorly paid and routinely abusive, yet lawmakers mostly ignore all that, cozying up to the abusers because, well, they're rich and politically connected. As a result, most of today's restaurant workers are paid a sub-minimum wage that was set 32 years ago at $2.13 an hour. That's not a wage, it's an insult. Yet most lawmakers refuse to raise it, bowing to the piles of campaign cash they get through a lobbying front called the National Restaurant Association, dominated by multi-billion-dollar food chains. Worse, in the past decade, this consortium of greedy wage suppressors even devised a diabolical scheme to make restaurant workers pay for the industry's lobbying campaigns to hold down wages. The association bought an outfit that provides hokey food safety training to workers. Then it lobbied to get California, Florida, Illinois, Texas, and other states to require that all employees not only undergo the silly online training course, but also making them pay $15 each for the training. This is Jim Hightower saying, guess what? NRA then uses these worker training fees to fund its lobbying efforts that let restaurants pay poverty wages. And that, kids, is how inequality happens.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Now, you may remember we talked about this case down in Florida where the governor down there decided, I don't like this state attorney. I want to get rid of him. Suspended him, I guess. Sent him to the curb because I guess the claim was he wasn't going to uphold the law. Now, this guy's elected by the people to come do a job. I believe as a state attorney, you've got discretion on who you prosecute and if you can win cases. I don't know that I want a governor, coming into those places and putting the heavy hand on it. But the judge came and said that, you know what, the governor was wrong, violated the Constitution, and this guy should have never been suspended and should be back to work. Now, the governor's I don't think he's ever going to put him back. But it shows how much these folks are willing to abuse the system. And here to share some thoughts on this is Andrew Warren. Andrew is the duly elected state attorney for the Tampa area, the person who was affected by this. That's why I asked him back to come explain what was going on. Andrew, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks so much for having me back.
So walk me through first what happened, just so we're completely clear on what happened to you and what the governor actually did.
So back in August of last year, the governor suspended me without warning. I was doing my job. I was actually sitting in the grand jury supervising the indictment of two 40-year-old cold cases that my office had solved. And sheriff's deputies came in, basically told me I'd been suspended, and they escorted me out of the building, totally out of left field. And, from that moment, we saw it as a political stunt. We ended up filing a suit in federal court. The governor's rationale for suspending me was he claimed that I had these blanket policies of not prosecuting things. I had spoken up about the criminalization of abortion after the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. I had criticized states that were passing these laws that were really harsh on gay, lesbian, transgender individuals and violating their constitutional rights. And the governor basically looked at those things and just said, well, this guy's not going to follow the law just as you said. And so he suspended me, and then I'm out of a job. I mean, the Florida Senate has to be the ones to remove me, but the governor suspended me and replaced me with, an acolyte of his. So long story short, we ended up going to court, and it took months. There was ultimately a trial on it, live witnesses, people are testifying. And in federal court in Florida, and the judge made very specific findings, as you said. In short, he said, I did nothing wrong. I did my job really well. The governor's allegations against me were totally false. They were without any factual merit whatsoever. And he said that Governor DeSantis broke federal law and state law. But, the kicker to this, the judge said he didn't have the jurisdiction to put me back in to office. He basically said it had to go to state court. And he called on the governor to reinstate me. He said, look, if the facts are clear, Andrew didn't do anything wrong. Governor, you broke the law. I can't force you to put him back in, but you should put him back in.
Yeah, but again, the laws don't matter. It's the ideology. And I'm sure that the person that he replaced you with is an anti-woke warrior who's going to go after you fill in the blank. Because it's ideological. It's not about upholding the law. It's not about doing what's right for the public. It's about their blind faith ideology and hatred of others.
That's right. I mean, what's crazy is that they made all these allegations against me that are totally false, and they just paint this caricature of me. Like, oh, he's a radical militant. They use the word militant, woke, which I don't even know what that means. And the governor's people didn't even know what that means. They just said, it's a term they use to basically demonize the other side. But yeah, he appointed someone. And look, she used to work in my office. My beef isn't with her because it's the governor, that's right. The fight we're in. But what's disconcerting about the whole thing is you have someone who wasn't elected, not accountable to anyone except the governor who put her in place. That's how kingdoms and tyrannies work. That's not how democracy works. I mean, elected officials need to be accountable to the people. It's just, it turned our democracy upside down on its head.
Now, the interesting thing, Andrew, is I've had a couple people the last time you were on weigh in and say, well, if he's not going to go after, following the law, because at the time everyone assumed that you had come out and said, as some people have said, I'm not going to go after women who have sought care in other states. I'm not going to do this. And they truly believed you said that. I'm looking at Illinois right now. The governor there, proposed an assault weapons ban, and immediately you had like 70 county sheriffs come out and say we're not going to enforce this at all publicly, basically issuing press releases. We're not doing this. What would stop a governor like Pritzker from going, saying, fine, we're going to replace all of you? So for me, this is one of those double-edged swords. I got my conservative warriors going, we'll get that guy, without understanding that it comes both ways.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And in fact, that happened in Florida too. There was discussion of it wasn't even a total ban. I think it was a registry for assault weapons. And members of the Sheriff's Association and certainly one elected sheriff said, we're never going to enforce that. And it came up during trial. And the governor's people at trial, with a straight face, tried to tell this federal judge, well, we're looking into whether we're going to suspend that sheriff. And the judge was like, are you effing kidding me? I mean, you were saying that, but the governor appeared at like an event with him after he said it because he's a Republican and the sheriff's a Republican. This was all political. I said it from the beginning. And now 6 months later, after a trial on the merits, a federal judge confirmed the same thing. He said this was a political hit job from the beginning. And to your point, Rick, we don't want one elected official taking other elected officials out of office. That's not how democracy works. That's how tyrannies work.
No, absolutely. And this is where if DeSantis had a problem with you, go run a candidate next election, go down there, stump for that candidate, fund him, do whatever you got to do. But this is heavily fascistic. This is the kind of stuff that we would look at other countries and condemn. But yet, again, I listen to some of my conservative friends trying to do the mental gymnastics of justifying because, well, he wasn't going to go after the wokeosphere. You didn't actually say any of that stuff, though.
No, and it's just, a symptom of how divisive our politics have become. And it's really sad when they sacrifice common sense for partisanship.
Yeah, we bought the hat.
Yeah, I mean, look, when we're right, we're right. When we're wrong, we're wrong. I'm a Democrat. Democrats aren't right all the time. Like, our leaders make mistakes, and Republicans do too. But our politics have become so divisive. It's no matter what, the other side is always wrong, and my side's always right. I mean, the judge told the governor, you've broken federal and state law. You should do the right thing and reappoint him. It's a very simple fix. And we went to the governor afterwards and said, you put your hand on the Bible and swore to God to uphold the law. Are you going to uphold it? And the govenor's response, or through his, press office, was like, no, we're not,
because there's nobody to hold us accountable and to make us do it. Because eventually you replace you go and you replace all the people who disagree with you. Eventually you have a bunch of sycophants who are going to do whatever you want. So there's no legal recourse whatsoever. There's nothing to stop them from tyranny, as you've pointed out. And it's interesting. It's interesting that comes up because all of my conservative friends love to tell me how tyrannical Democrats are.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, when we're sacrificing our loyalty to the fundamental values of our country, the rule of law, free speech, democracy, the fact that elections matter. And it doesn't matter if our side's always right and the other side is always wrong, that's when America starts to crumble.
No, we're in scary times right now. You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Andrew Warren. He's the duly elected state's attorney for Tampa, Florida, ousted by Governor Ron DeSantis. Like we've been talking about, the judge said, you violated the law, Ron. You broke the law. Put him back to work. You want to check out his website, andrewwarrenfl.com. We'll get links out on social media. Now, I'm not a lawyer, not a prosecutor, but there is some prosecutorial discretion. There are crimes you can go, these are lower down on my want to waste resources going after. They're much bigger fish to fry, so to speak. Chasing a woman across the border if she got an abortion. I don't know if that rises high on the list of crimes that we want to indict. Would you have that right as the state attorney to choose not to do those things? Just as sheriffs right now still have the choice to go, it's a small crime, I'm going to let it go. Is there such a thing?
There absolutely is. I mean, it's called prosecutorial discretion. We all know the phrase. That's exactly what it means. I mean, we want our prosecutors to set priorities. We don't want prosecutors to treat every crime equally. I mean, I was asked earlier today during an interview, well, is it fair to say that you were aggressively prosecuting these low-end crimes? And you know what? No, we weren't aggressively prosecuting panhandling and driving on a suspended license with the same level of aggressiveness that we're prosecuting rape and murder and robbery. Absolutely not. I mean, let's have some common sense about this. We try to put resources in the place to maximize public safety, to go after the crimes that pose the biggest threats to public safety. And not all crimes are created equal. Yeah. So that's what prosecutors have been doing since the beginning of time. I mean, that's what they should be doing. They should be transparent about where their priorities are.
And your priorities are why people elected you, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of the reason that we elect you guys, so that when you come before us, you lay out your record and say, this is what I've done. Now, we can argue that's good or bad, and there's an argument to be had on both sides, but this is our system right now. You don't go and usurp that by saying, you're not doing what I want you to do, so I'm going to replace you with someone who's going to do what I want them to do.
That's right. And interestingly, in the judge's opinion, he said just that. I mean, he said there can be legitimate disagreements about the best way to, be a state attorney, the best way to maximize public safety, the best way to prioritize resources. Those are the types of issues that elections turn on. Those are not the types of issues that suspensions should be based on. And that's why he was saying the governor broke the law. I mean, the governor violated my First Amendment rights to free speech because he disagreed with the things I was saying. He disagreed with what I stand for as an elected official. The governor broke state law by suspending me for things which you can't suspend me for. I mean, I didn't commit a crime. I didn't neglect any duty. It was just a difference of opinion, and it was a political hit job.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, Andrew, is I had a teacher on the show a couple of years ago. It's been several years, and he said, the one positive that's coming out of this Trump era is that we're getting a firsthand, a hands-on lesson in civics. We're learning the powers of attorney generals. We're learning, the names of election officials, states attorneys. We're finally finding out what how important all of these positions have always been, but we never talked about, because who secretaries of state in each state, who knew we even had them? Now we're finding out just how important those jobs are and how important they are to not be so hyper political, hyper ideological. Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, that's certainly a silver lining that you have to dig deep to find in what's happened recently. But I agree that people are learning about the importance of these things. I mean, think about what happened in Georgia, right? Where Donald Trump picks up the phone and calls the Secretary of State and is like, hey, we need to find whatever the number was, 15,000 votes. And if you're in North Korea or China, the Secretary of State says, yes, sir, I'll go do it. But in America, it's not how it works. And the guy stood up for what's right, for our fundamental values. And what did he get for it? Death threats, people protesting against him, saying he's not, needs to be removed, because this was a Republican. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm repeating myself, but when we start sacrificing our values for partisanship, that's the beginning of the end, or at least the beginning of the end of a stable, functioning democracy.
Now, you guys have sent a letter to the governor's office, saying, look, you lost. The judge ruled this, put me back to work. Have you gotten a response from that letter?
Not from the governor. His press office, put out some political spin that read as if they hadn't even looked at the opinion. I mean, they're just saying things that are completely false. Well, Andrew Warren was, suspended for neglect of duty, and the judge confirmed it. No, he didn't. The judge said the exact opposite. But the governor hasn't answered the simple question of, are you going to uphold the law as you swore on the Bible to do when you were sworn in as the governor of Florida? That's it. Yes or no? You're going to follow the law? Yes or no? Or are you going to do what's convenient for you?
Now, for me, this is a really important case. This is really important because this guy is on track to potentially be one of a next president, potentially. I hope not, but we'll see. But this kind of dictatorial kind of decision, this kind of behavior, I fear at a higher level.
Rick, I do too. It used to be that politicians would campaign on policy, on vision, on optimism, and the direction they wanted to take the country into. And now, after the Trump era, or after Trump, you have people who are trying to promote themselves just based on being a carnivore barker, on pulling these political stunts. It's really sad. It is really sad. And it's not, look, there's a lot of focus on me in this because I'm the one who got suspended. I'm the one fighting back, but this is much bigger than just me.
Yeah.
This is about when government has too much power and we don't hold people accountable for breaking the law. It's the little guy that gets hurt, right? It's the unions that get trampled upon. It's the teachers. It's the single moms. It's the people who can't fight back. It's the people whose opinion may be a minority opinion. And it's very easy for us to, when the referee makes a bad call that goes in favor of our team, to close our eyes to it. But the right thing to do is to stand up and say, that's not right. We have to stand up for our rights. That is the most important thing, those fundamental freedoms.
Last question I got for you, kind of two parts. One, when we were last elected, are you going to run for re-election? And I got to wonder what happens if you win in re-election. Will he resuspend you? And then how can we help get you resources to make sure that when you run again, that you have the resources to get that? And how can we help? I guess that's the other part of it.
Well, so I was elected in 2016, re-elected in 2020. So I'm up again in November of 24. I haven't made any decisions about that. My focus has been on getting reinstated so that I can serve out the last 2 years of the term that I was elected to serve. You can learn more about, our fight at AndrewWarrenFL.com. First name, last name, AndrewWarrenFL for Florida.com. And again, this is so much bigger than me. This is about fair elections. This is about free speech. This is about the rule of law. And it shouldn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. This should bother you. It should bother you when elected officials break the law and judges say you broke the law and their response is, so what?
Wow. My mind is in this space where I'm going, if the tables were flipped, if this was a Democratic governor, suspending one of these sheriffs, I can't imagine the right-wing echo chamber and the outrage candy that they would be shoveling down our throats at every minute. This would be all we would hear about. And sadly, I haven't heard as much as I want to. So, Andrew, I hope you'll come back and keep us up to date with what's going on. And I'm hoping to keep out there, keeping the fight on. Thanks so much, Rick. Be happy to be back. And look, we're going to win this thing. We'll keep fighting until we do. Good stuff. The website, AndrewWarrenFL.com. We'll get links out on social media. I want to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1897, and the founding charter of the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union was formed out of the merger of 7 other unions. What made the meat cutters unique for its time was that it included both skilled, or craft labor, and unskilled, or industrial workers. Organizing this complex workforce was made even more difficult because of the diversity of skills and ethnic makeup of the laborers that made up the stockyards. From the Civil War until the 1920s, the stockyards on Chicago's South Side were the heart of the meatpacking industry. Railways from Chicago brought meat raised on Midwestern grazing lands and farms to East Coast markets. In 1880, the Chicago stockyards processed 20 million cows and pigs. The workers who processed these animals worked in deplorable and unsafe conditions for low wages. In 1904, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union led a major strike in the stockyards of Chicago. Author Upton Sinclair included the strike in his famous novel, The Jungle. The strike was broken, in part by management bringing in scab labor. African Americans were among that scab labor. Black workers had been largely excluded from union leadership in the yards. At the time, black workers also were often organized into segregated locals, especially in the skilled trades. The failure of the 1904 strike evidenced the importance of organizing workers across racial and ethnic lines. It was an example of the long-standing tactic by management to attempt to divide workers by race and ethnicity, a tactic that continues to this day, highlighting the labor call of United We Bargain, Divided We Beg. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Trump unveiled his education policy today. I'm like, really? Trump's got an education policy? And all it is a bunch of right-wing grievances. It's the woke stuff. We're not gonna allow that theory about race that's critical. Nothing on gender identity or ideology. No inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto our children, he says. Calls for opening civil rights investigations into any school district that engages in race-based discrimination, particularly against Asians. So this is, again, taking all of these hot-button right-wing talking points, all of the talk radio outrage candy, and making this government policy. This is the problem. This is the problem with governing by F channel. This is the problem with governing by hate radio. This is the problem of allowing the fringe, the inmates to rule the asylum. And I look at this case in Florida. I look at this. Come with me on this journey, if you will. Can you imagine if, Tom Wolf, governor of Pennsylvania at the time, would have come into my county when the sheriff here said, I'm not enforcing any mask mandates, and replaced him with someone said, I'm going to heavily enforce mask mandates. Can you imagine the kind of outrage that the echo chamber would globally? I mean, it'd be across the country within seconds. It would be the lead on that Tucker, and it'd be the lead on Hannity. It would be the lead outrage. And they would hammer on that hammer. Look at this abuse of power. You hear nothing about what they've done to this guy down in Florida. And he's right. It's not about him. It's about the fact that a governor can come in and throw out a duly elected official that he doesn't agree with his policies on. Now, as was stated, the judge was very clear. There's no evidence that this guy ever said he wasn't going to uphold the law. He never said, I'm going to deliberately not chase down those women who get abortions in other states. I'm not going to go through their garbage. He didn't say any of this stuff. Now, I personally would want someone to say that, because I don't know that we want people, digging through women's garbage to find out if maybe they did. And here's the other part. It's not even a crime yet. I mean, this is the thing. It's this idea that we're going to make a law in the future that he's saying he's not going to uphold if and when we pass it. If he actually said it and the judge said he didn't. But again, this was a power grab. And if you let him get away with it at this level, it's just a state attorney. What's the big deal? Big deal is this was an elected official. This was someone that the people of that area said, I cast my ballot. This guy won an election. Our system is you take people out at the elections. You don't do these heavy-handed things. You don't do this in America. And this guy wants to be president. So where does that end? Do we see it happen with federal attorneys? Do we see it happen with, I don't know. I don't know how far this goes. And when you stack the courts with ideologues instead of people who believe in the law, which is I have such problems with the folks in our Supreme Court who swore to uphold the law, who swore to uphold the Constitution, all said they believed in decided law and stare decisis, and John Roberts, I'm going to call balls and strikes. All of them universally said Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. And then immediately, the first chance they got, they overturned it. Because they didn't believe in the law. Now, should Biden be able to go in and say, well, you guys said you were going to uphold the law, you didn't. They go? Is that how that should work? Curious your thoughts. Because this is the DeSantis world. This is the Republican world and the direction they want to take us. And if he gets away with this, how much further will he go? Who's next? Who's safe? You? Me? Think about it. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.